Identifying as a mom, daughter, conservative, friend, parental rights activist, Republican Party delegate, lover of freedom, conspiracy theorist, mama bear, and force to be reckoned with, this is Raising Liberty with Lindsay Beckham. Happy Friday. So I'm laughing a little bit listening to that intro play because I hear conspiracy theorists and I automatically think about our week-long conversation that's been going on about the moon landing. We won't get into that. We could do a whole entire hour-long podcast about, wow, the moon landing was faked, but we won't go there. Not today. Not with Shaun here. So we have Shaun Yurtkuran here, and he has a ton of experience in the legal field and was a assistant district attorney at the Hinds County DA's office for years. And he has some stories that of some events that went down in the Hinds County DA's office that would make you think it's coming straight out of a movie. So before we get into all that, Shaun, thank you for being here. And tell us, how did you find yourself as an assistant district attorney in Hinds County, of all places?
I thought you were going to ask me how I found myself here, but that's a good question too, right? But no, how I found myself as an assistant DA. I graduated law school in 2005, and I went to work for Richard Schwartz. He's a great guy, actually. And I know what people think because he's
ambulance chaser.
Yeah, but he's a wonderful guy, and the people at that firm are wonderful. It was just you do car wrecks and you deal with insurance companies, and that's not why I went to law school. It wasn't for me, and I do that, but I really appreciate that job, and I still like those folks a whole lot. I even went to their Christmas party last year. Good people over there, but it wasn't for me, and I was there for a couple years, and I really always wanted to be in a criminal lawyer, and that's kind of why I went to law school and all that stuff. So, around 2007, I'd met this guy named Robert Smith. He was running for district attorney, and somebody
where'd y'all meet?
Well, somebody organized a meeting for us because I had worked in politics, kind of just more volunteer, kind of like you have, and just kind of starting up. That was in my 20s then. It was 2007, so I was 27 years old, and I worked on like the Gore campaign, and worked in the Ohio House of Representatives before that when I went to Ohio State. And so, I was interested in politics, and he was running for DA, and I said, this sounds fun. I need someone to help run the campaign. So I did that, and somehow we won that election in 2007. So, and that's how it all started. And then he asked me if I wanted to come work there. And at the time I was working on the campaign, I wasn't really thinking about working there. I was just kind of something to do. And then he kind of said, man, come on, why don't you come on, do it with me? So I went on.
And so you start working.
Yeah, January 2008. Yep.
And things got interesting pretty quickly, or were things smooth in the beginning?
Well, it was pretty, we had the first 4 years in the first term, it was really calm. We had some really good, great group of people that worked there, people that I'm still friends with to this day that have been, really close to me. And, some guys that were older than me that taught me how to try cases and become a prosecutor, and I just feel so long ago that I can't even remember that when I think back on it. It's like, wow, there was a time I didn't know how to do this, but there was. And there were some guys like Scott Rogelio and Armstrong Walters that really took me under their wing, and, I learned how to do it. And so I hit the ground running. I started trying murder cases like my second month there, and just didn't look back.
I think it was really cool. So you came on and did the podcast with me last week.
Yeah.
With the prosecutors in Rankin County who just prosecuted the Carly Gregg trial that's been all the rage in national media. And one thing that we talked about was the Hutto case. So you got the last conviction, or you put a man on death row, the last death conviction in the state of Mississippi.
No, in Hinds County.
In Hinds County.
Hinds County.
And, I thought it was really kind of cool that when you brought that case up, Catherine Newman, who is a prosecutor in Rankin that prosecuted the Carly Gregg case, she said, we see that referenced all the time, the Hutto case. It's almost like things kind of coming full circle to now see that you have made an impact and that is referenced so much in case law.
Yeah, it was a pretty big case. Real briefly, James Hutto was this white guy, huge MMA fighter, big old guy, and He'd actually fought Butterbean at one point. You know, he was kind of famous. I know you might not know who that is,
I
but
don't know who
the
better
guys
be.
out there probably know who I'm talking about. And he was a big guy, and he came here in 2010 and stopped at the Healthplex in Clinton, the big Baptist Healthplex, and that's where a lot of elderly people hang out there. And he was in his 40s then, and he met a lady named Ethel Winstead Simpson, who was about 81 at the time. And you know, he kind of charmed her, flirted with her, you know how that goes. And she had some money, and so she took him to the casino out in Vicksburg, and he went out there with her. And then on the way back, he killed her, and he stepped on her head to death, crushed her head to death,
Gosh.
and threw her in a hog pen out in, I believe it was Edwards, Edwards or Bolton, one of those two. And then stole her Mercedes and drove to Alabama. And then he got to Birmingham, and he murdered another elderly woman in her bed, beat her to death too. Then he drove down to Auburn. He was a big Auburn fan, weird, and it was during Cam Newton's season that he won Auburn won the national championship, and he was going to go to the game, and he had downed another guy, and then he ended up attacking that guy with like this giant boulder and crushing his head in. And that guy lived, you know, and so they arrested him then, and they gave us first crack at him. And so we actually tried that case in May of 2013.
Yeah, and I know at some point, I want to get you back here and
Yeah.
like, break down that case because I think it's very,
Yeah, it's a
very
long drawn,
interesting.
yeah.
So the first term or after Robert Smith is elected
Mhm.
DA, in the first term, things kinda go smoothly. You're getting your footing, you're learning what it's like to be a prosecutor, and, I'm sure that you've taken a lot of that experience, and that's making you a better defense attorney today because of everything that you learned at that time. But a lot of things when did things go south, or when did things start to get a little sticky in the DA's
Yeah,
office?
sure. Yeah, it's, you know, Robert was a criminal defense attorney in the past, so he had some of those connections. And, you know, the first term was fine. Then there was this kind of infamous murder around here of a man named James Craig Anderson. And he was a black man that was out in South Jackson, and he was run over by young white men from Rankin County and Puckett specifically, where actually I went to high school, interesting enough. And the guy named Daryl Deadman, who's the cousin of Christian Deadman, who was
Yeah.
involved in the Goon Squad thing. And so that case happened. It attracted national attention. CNN came down here, all the stuff, and that murder was pretty big. The feds got involved. They prosecuted people that we couldn't, that we didn't have laws that would attach them. We prosecuted Deadman, and they did too. And so that there was a lot of publicity around that. Robert got very jealous of other people in the office that were working on that case, and everything kind of at that point started going south quickly. And this was in 2011, prosecution around 2012. So
And so at some point, the feds show up.
yeah. Mhm.
And why were they watching Robert?
Well, that's a little bit later. They had apparently been watching Robert for quite a while, and, you know, certain dealings he had with, maybe drug associates in the past over the years, and there were some, issues, and so they had been monitoring him for quite a while, and I was not aware of that until I actually left the office in 2015. So that's when I left and kind of became aware of what was going on.
So what was, like, the final straw? What was the breaking point for you when you said, "Hey, I've gotta get out of this situation?"
Well, around the time I was talking about James Craig Anderson, he started firing a lot of people in the office. He was getting increasingly paranoid. I assumed it was due to drug use or whatever it was, but and he just started firing people at will, and you never knew when your day was up. And eventually, he just kept firing people. And I was lucky enough that I was kind of like the only one left. I think I mean, just a couple others with experience enough to hang around. He kind of couldn't get rid of everybody, but he would always come up to me and threaten that he was going to fire me. So you never knew, you know, when your day was come. So of course, you know, just like any person would, I was looking for a way out. And a good friend of mine, Patrick Beasley, was working at the Attorney General's office in consumer protection. And in 2015, he got me a job over there.
We were you and I were talking to a friend of ours the other day, and he was asking us, "Why do you think it is that some people can commit a crime and it's like the book's thrown at them, and almost like they wanna make an example out of them, but then yet we see other people who commit crime after crime after crime and continue to get away with it." And I think this is probably what was going on in the DA's office at that time is probably a good example of that because I've heard you say before there were basically drug dealers who kinda hung around that people they were there so much that people almost would think that they worked there.
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a contingent of drug dealers that would hang around the office, and there was always rumors that, you know, Robert was on the I mean, I think he probably was, on the take from them, and that files would disappear. their cases, those drug dealers' cases. So that was, really concerning. I know that I got the Mississippi Narcotics, worked closely with us on some stuff, and I became kind of friends with those agents, and they would tell me things and that they were concerned about their cases. And so that, yes, that was a concern. That there was constant, I guess you would say, like files missing, cases gone when related to dope dealers. Yeah, sure.
So you got a phone call at some point that was pretty concerning.
Well, that was, yeah, the chronology of that, I guess it would be easier if I
Okay,
explain.
okay,
So
back up.
yeah, so I'll back up with that. So I left in 2015 because the condition of what was going on in the office really disturbed me, and, I didn't know if I was gonna have a job one day or not. Anybody that worked there at the time would tell you the same thing. You didn't know. So, happen chance, once I'm at the attorney general's office, I was working on this case from this man named Chris Butler, and, he worked at a mattress store selling furniture. And, if you know anything about those mattress stores, they have these, like, low income, high interest rate credit cards that they'll basically give to anybody. You don't even need a
Mhm,
bank account. And, so what Butler would do is he'd go out there and he'd sign up, people off the street to get this credit account. Not and they were never gonna buy any furniture. They'd come in, say, "Hey, I'm gonna buy this," and they never get the furniture. They'd just leave, but the credit card company would pay the store, and Butler would sell the furniture out the back of the store, so they're getting paid twice on this stuff, right?
mhm.
And, so this went on for a while, and, nobody would ever notice because the high interest credit card companies are used to not getting paid. That's kinda what they are. If they do get paid, then they make a lot of money, like you buy a $300 couch, but you end up paying $5,000 for it.
Or
Uh
Shad White when you need him.
yeah, well, I don't know if Shad had anything to do with this. I don't know if he could do anything with that,
Right,
but
yeah.
yeah, I'm sure he would if he could. But so eventually we got a call. One of my investigators, actually, who's current is Bo Lucky, who's the Capitol Police Chief, and Lee McDivitt and Miller Falk were talking to the credit card company who said, "Hey, we got about $300,000-$400,000 outstanding bills out of this one store in Jackson, Mississippi. This is how big the scam was." And so we investigated it and found out this is what Butler was doing. Well, we, arrested him, and we had a preliminary hearing on him, which is, a hearing to see whether you bind a case over to the grand jury before it goes to the grand jury, before it gets indicted. You have once somebody's arrested, they get a preliminary hearing. And, so the preliminary hearing, we're doing it there, and this is, again, an attorney general's office case. Well, Robert Smith, my old boss, shows up at the hearing and starts raising hell with the judge and going crazy, saying that we're prosecuting an innocent man and that we, framed him on some dope case, which we don't even know about any dope case at this point. We just know that we got this mattress fraud case. That's what we're doing. I was doing white collar crime at this point,
Mhm.
and he shows up and tries to block the whole thing, and it was the damnedest thing I'd ever seen. So we got kind of suspicious. We're like, why is Robert trying to help this guy? What's the connection? And what we did was we asked his defense attorney if he would be willing to give us information of why Robert was trying to help him because it was really suspicious. And then, Robert got wind of that, and he assumed that he phrased it as we were intimidating a witness, which is kind of ridiculous considering prosecutors make plea bargains and try to get information all the time. It's part of our job, it's part of our job
Right.
all the time. That's
Yeah.
what you do. You have to indict every prosecutor. So he, decided that he wanted to indict us for that. And, so I get a call one day, like a month or so later, from an FBI agent who says, "Well, you're gonna be indicted today." And I'm like, "Well, that's great news. This is what you always want when you're in law school, to get indicted, right?" And, I said, "Well, that's great. Well, how do you know that?" He said, "Well, I can't tell you that, and I didn't know at the time. Well, come to find out later, there was an assistant DA in the office named Ivan Johnson who'd been taking bribes to lower bonds on criminal defendants. And the FBI had caught him and then turned him into an informant and wired him up. And that's how they knew Robert was going to indict me and Patrick Beasley, because they had Robert on tape talking about this.
So the FBI was hearing from
Yeah, they do
someone in the
everything,
office
right,
who
like
was
they always
wired.
do, yes. They had an actual assistant DA that was crooked, taking money to help criminal defendants, and they caught him, and then they used him against Robert. Yeah, that's what happened.
So, did did he have charges brought against him?
The assistant DA, Ivan Johnson?
Yeah.
Yeah, eventually he did, but he was a cooperating witness, so I think they ended up giving him probation or something. He never went to prison as far as I know.
And so what ended up happening with Robert after they had all this information, they had someone wired, they were kind of listening in
Mhm.
to what was going on and knew that he was taking bribes and doing things that he shouldn't be doing, of course, as a
Right.
district attorney. Was he arrested or
Yeah, Jim Hood, actually, Attorney General at the time, they arrested him on a charge of, like, it's I can't remember the exact name title, but basically it's helping a criminal defendant while you're a district attorney, and I forget the actual specific charge, but so they arrested him on that, and, they had some evidence. They didn't arrest him on bribery, Now to make that clear. But they had evidence that he had taken bribery. So later he went to trial, and there was a witness named Too Sweet
I
Henderson.
was gonna ask you about Too
Too Sweet
Sweet.
Henderson, yeah, you everybody get that name? And Too Sweet had testified that he had given Robert bribe money in exchange for
Wait,
getting rid
was
of
he really sweet?
I don't know, but, Too Sweet had gotten a pardon from Haley Barbour,
Okay.
and, Robert had actually sponsored the pardon on the application.
Is that, like, right before Haley left office? Did he pardon a lot of
He
people?
did, and, he ended up somehow Too Sweet got himself a pardon from Haley Barbour, but yeah, it's amazing how all this connects, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so Robert did he lose his position as
No,
DA?
actually, so they went to trial the first time in December of 2016, it was a hung jury, and, then they retried him in the summer, and he was found not guilty of that case. So he continued being district attorney, till he did not run again in 2019, and then Jody Owens was elected in 2019. But, yeah, and he was found not guilty of it all, even though, it was clear that he was helping Christopher Butler for some purpose that we didn't know. The whole time, though, you wouldn't know it because the Clarion Ledger was writing articles making it
Anna
seem like
Wolf, right?
and, yeah, Anna Wolf had written articles because I guess she was talking to Robert Smith that made Christopher Butler seem like he was like this innocent guy that had been framed on a dope case, which again, I didn't probably explain that the dope case was something completely different than what we had. That was a case that our office, the Attorney General, was not even prosecuting. It was Robert's own office prosecuting him on a dope case that was put together by MBN. So the Clarion Ledger articles were making it seem like us and MBN were in some sort of cahoots to frame this Butler guy, who in the end was on video packing the dope, which nobody had ever watched, which is the funny thing. Nobody ever watched that portion of the video. Robert had claimed that that didn't exist and was tampered with. But when people actually watched the whole video, and it was like hundreds of hours of tape, and you finally got to the portion, there's Butler packing his dope. So, I mean, if somebody had just watched the video, you would have known that this guy was, packing dope in his own house.
So even though you had left the DA's office and you're now working for the Attorney General,
At that point, yeah.
you're still being haunted, I guess, by the things that Robert Smith had done.
Yeah, right. That would never, the DA's office, Hinds County, never leaves you. I jokingly told someone the other day that it's like, I think the courthouse is built on an Indian burial ground because it's cursed. And I love that place. I love the people that work there, just great people. But there's just been some bad juju, as you would say, coming from it over the years. So
Yeah, so and you continued as a prosecutor at the Attorney General's office for a while after this?
I did, and then I went to work in Yazoo County as an assistant DA again and did that work, right? And then now I'm here doing criminal defense. I'm on the other side, so but, yeah, so it was a torrid affair with Robert, and his I mean, I don't know if you wanna call it his condition, it was either drug use or paranoia that caused just a lot of strange incidents, and also the kinds of people that would end up at the DA's office. I made reference to this before. We had one investigator who was a JPD officer at one point, and he had a twin brother. I mean
I read you wrote about this, in a post earlier, and
Mhm.
I just it just almost seems too unbelievable that could actually be happening.
Yeah, like for everybody that's listening, it's so he would when he was sick, he let his twin brother wear his uniform and get in his patrol car, and patrol around Jackson. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that would happen. And then, we had an office clerk that was fixing cases as well, like taking money from drug dealers and getting rid of their cases or telling them they were. And these are the kind of things that were happening in an actual DA's office in a
The
capital
cases are
city.
just piling up.
Yeah, they're just disappearing, and, and the drug dealers that Robert was associated with, the, ones that would hang around the office, it became so normal, that you'd have drug dealers there, and I said something about this on the radio today, like, could you imagine Bubba Bramlett hanging out with drug dealers? Like, that's so ridiculous that nobody would
Yeah.
even. But I mean, that's the kind of things that went on there, and it was just, and there was nothing anybody really could say, it was just supposed to be normal. There's dope dealers hanging out at the DA's office, and, so, you just kinda did your job and kept your head down.
Yeah. Where's Robert Smith now?
Well, he actually was killed in 2021, in a car wreck, and, there's a lot of mystery around
I was
that
gonna say, was
from
it actually the car wreck that killed him? Or
well, I've talked to people that say, "Yes, 100% that's what happened," and I believe that's what's happened. But you know me, I'm not a conspiracy
well,
theorist.
I am.
I know you are, I'm not, I believe that's happened, but everybody else I talk in the community thinks there was some sort of foul play involved. I don't think that, but that's what everybody I talk to, word on the street as I call it, says that there was some sort of something weird. And considering his connections and his associations, it's easy to think that.
So, backing up just a little bit, When he came into the courtroom that day during
Mhm.
the Butler trial
Yep, hearing, right.
or the
Yeah.
hearing, was everyone kind of wondering what's going on with the DA in Hinds County? I
Yeah,
mean, was
yeah.
because the way that it sounds is like he must have been out of his mind.
Well, he looked out of his mind. Judge Priester, who actually recently passed away about a week ago, was the judge for that hearing, and he, said afterwards, like, "I've never seen anything like that," and he actually filed a bar complaint to the Mississippi bar saying that, like, "I've never seen anyone act like this in courtroom, especially, a district attorney is going to bat for a criminal defendant," which it that's why we made Chris Butler the deal, because it was so out of bounds that a DA would try to protect a criminal defendant, especially on a case that had nothing to do with him, which was our mattress fraud case. And then, of course, trying to help him on the dope case, which was his office's case. It was just, no one had ever seen anything like that before. So it gave you the thought process that, hey, he's obviously taking money from this guy. At least that's what I thought at the time. Because why else would you do this? This guy's obviously guilty. He's obviously a known drug dealer. He'd been convicted before, and it didn't make any sense to anybody. But he kept on keeping on with it, so yeah, that's why we made the offer that we did.
One thing you and I talk about a lot is the media
Yeah,
and how skewed the media can
sure.
be on certain things. I mean, I know you actually were in DC at a Moms for Liberty conference
Right.
and we're watching the news talk about Trump showing up to a conference where he is supporting this hate group that hates the LGBTQ plus
Right.
IALMNOP, as many letters as you can add to it at this point,
Yeah.
but hates that group of people. Yet I know you've said that you were just downstairs talking to a lesbian with rainbow colored hair.
Mm.
And so you were kind of seeing at that point the media be skewed in a certain way. But going back to your time at the DA's office,
Yeah, I've seen it before, all this, this
yeah,
is and, I've told this, like, I'm not a Donald Trump fan, right, or guy at all,
right.
but the one thing I think that he says is right is the media is a bunch of liars.
Because you were a victim
Yeah, I've
to
been a
that,
victim of that
basically.
before, me and my friends have, and so he's not wrong when he says that they're gonna shape the narrative that they want, and I think, at that time, Anna Wolf was talking to Robert Smith, so this narrative was shaped that this man, Chris Butler, was being wrongfully prosecuted. He was innocent. If you read the Clarion Ledger, you can read the articles now and see them, and so but then once it came out that, "Hey, look, there's this dude and he's packing the dope," it all just kinda went silent, I mean, because
Mhm.
it was obvious that he was guilty. But that's the way the media can do. They can shape a narrative and make. I mean, me, I remember I had so much anxiety during that time because people are
Yeah.
coming up to me like, "Did you frame a dope dealer?" No, I did it. Like, first of all, I had nothing to do with the dope case. I'm prosecuting him on a mattress fraud case.
But you
But
read it in the Clarion Ledger, so you think that
yeah,
it's must be true.
right. You think it's true, and people all around thought it was true, and kind of hurts your professional reputation. Like, are
Yeah.
you trying to frame this innocent man? No. One thing, I don't have anything to do with that. Second of all, like, he's not innocent of anything. And the MBN guys are great guys that worked on that. I talked to one of them last week, and they took tons of flack as good law enforcement officers for a guy that's just a scumbag dope dealer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That the media had built up this narrative that he was some sort of a, I don't know what you would call it, victim of bad justice system, which was completely inaccurate.
Yeah, I love the NBN guys. I used to and I know I've told you this, but I
Mm,
used to get to I worked with the ABC, the Alcohol Beverage Control, when I was in high school, and so I would ride they would ride with us to
right.
go and attempt to buy liquor, which, my friends were all really angry with me for doing that, but
Yeah.
made really good money doing that back
Yeah,
in high school.
right.
So, but I loved all the NBN guys, they were great, and so, but that was their case, that wasn't even y'all's case.
No, it was NBN, like, they had worked that and they'd given it to the DA's office. DA's office, Robert's office had indicted the case. We had nothing Attorney General's office had nothing to do with it. We had him on a mattress. We were doing look, at the Attorney General's office, you do kind of boring crimes, but that's why you go there to take a break from at least that's what I did. I was like, "Okay, I'm not doing any murders, no serial killers right now. Thank God, no children getting murdered." Like, I dealt with that for, like, 8 years of that, and, so it was a nice break, and, not knocking the Attorney General's office, it's got a good function, what they do. But so I was just doing white collar crime and we had nothing to do with any dope case. It just got lumped that we happened to arrest this dope dealer for doing another kind of illegal thing, that would happen.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know it when you looked at the media narrative. You'd think that it was all one big cabal of a bunch of corrupt prosecutors and cops trying to get somebody that was, obviously innocent. And I always wanted, I always thought about back then. I really wish the Clarion Ledger had written an apology to people, but the media
Yeah.
doesn't do that.
No, they don't.
They'll
They
try to
don't.
like smear your reputation, and they say nothing. I mean, they say nothing about what they did. And and then you see people like Anna Wolf go on and win a Pulitzer Prize. And every time I see that, I'm
Yeah,
like, I remember what you did last summer, like
exactly.
there's people that you hurt and you didn't pay attention to that and didn't
There's no
care. And
retraction,
right.
nothing to
Yeah.
clear your name, and
No.
after she has attempted to destroy it.
Right, many other people too, and then in the end, it came out who Robert was and the things he'd done, in the end, I mean, it ended. I mean, for him, it ended tragically, obviously, but it's the way it goes.
You worked on a case while you were at the DA's office that you actually had a pretty cool opportunity to go. You were contacted by Hulu and
Yeah,
got to go out to Hollywood and talk about Latasha
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 Norman.
Norman.
Mhm.
Tell us about her case.
Yeah, Latasha Norman was a student at Jackson State in 2007. She was dating a guy named Stanley Cole, and they're from Greenwood. She was raised by her stepfather, and who loved her a whole lot. So I still talk to him. I've told you that
Mhm.
before, and he
Yeah.
and I are friends. And so Stanley and her had broken up many times. They had a little volatile relationship, and they were dating other people, and how that works when you're in your 20s and those kinds of things happen.
She
And
was at Jackson State,
she was at
correct?
Jackson State, yeah, studying accounting, if I remember correctly. And he, one time he picked her up and he decided, he after class and he killed her and he threw her in the trunk of his car. Then he drove around and he picked up his other girlfriend and his other two friends, and they went out and went out to dinner, went to Walmart, and all the way her body's in the trunk of the car. So it was a pretty big case because it was at that time, because it was a college kidnapping, victim of domestic violence. And they've done several documentaries on it. This was the best one. And I know you've watched it, the one
Mhm.
Hulu did. So they'd contacted me, and I went out to Los Angeles last year, and we filmed it, and it came out
Death
in
in the
February.
Dorms.
Death and Dorm season 2. Yeah. And it's really, really good. And and I tell a lot of clients this too now on the criminal defense side. A lot of times when you're domestic relationships will go wrong, and that's what gets you a lot of times. It's one of the biggest indicators of something that's going to cause a murder is a domestic relationship. The other one is drugs, and the third is money. I mean, there's three main things, that are going to
Mhm.
cause a murder. You don't run into the James Hutto like we were talking in the worlds that much when it's just a sociopath. That's really good for TV or Netflix, and we see these serial killers, but
Uh-huh.
that is not 95% of your murders. Most of the time, it's going to be either drugs, money, or women. I always say, the way I put it, it's always
Yeah.
women. And so people, I think, really need to watch out. I represent people now involved in domestic relationships, and like you got to be careful because these things escalate really quickly. And I've seen the worst as it can go on many occasions. So it's something to really, I think it's really important that we look at that, and be cognizant of domestic violence and where it can go.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's something that you worked on before I knew you, and we just kind of pieced this together the other night is that, you had gone to Yazoo and were working in Yazoo County at the DA's office there and, actually prosecuted or were part of the case, the Ricky Saxton murder.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
And that was money, like you said, there's several things, and that
It
was
was over
about money,
money. Yeah.
which, I knew him personally, and
Yeah.
that man would give anyone the shirt off his back, like, he would have gladly helped anyone and given them any money that he had if he had been able to do so, and so the fact that he was murdered because of it, it's just it's
He was a
just
very
sick.
well liked man. That's why I always remember that case from that community. Yazoo County was actually was an interesting place to work. You're from there, so it's a small community. I had Yazoo County and Holmes County and Humphreys, in the Delta there, and it's a lot different than being a Hinds County prosecutor. Hinds County, big city, all this crime, all that stuff. You work in Yazoo County, the smaller jurisdictions. I used to call it like violent Mayberry, because it's kind of way it was. And so you get a different perspective. You know all the police really well. You know the people in the community a lot better, and he was, I learned a lot about him more than I would like in a victim in Jackson because there's so many victims in Jackson. There's so many
Mhm.
people. So it's a little bit different. But in Yazoo, everybody kind of knows you, and
Yeah.
so they take it a lot more personal than we would in Jackson.
Yeah, it's in Yazoo where you find, people that are cousins on both sides of
Yeah,
the
right.
family, so
Nothing
I'm
says loving like marrying your cousin, Yazzie, right? No,
well,
okay. You know,
well, it's
is
funny
that
because
it? I'm
well,
kidding.
it's funny
I'm
because
kidding.
I related to the Saxtons, my dad by
Right.
blood, but my mom by marriage. So
Um,
my mom I, is related to the Saxtons through a marriage. Not
okay.
so it's not actually marrying cousins,
Oh,
but
well, that's good, That's
yeah,
a step up in the
that's
21st
always better,
century. That's
right?
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
I'm
mean,
kidding.
this
I'm not
isn't
hating.
Alabama.
Yeah, I'm not hating on the Yazoo people. I loved Yazoo County. It was a great place to work, and I had a good time. It was a marked change from Jackson, obviously. And I love Hinds County. Hinds County DA's office I always say is my home, it's because of where I started my whole career out, and the people there that I just adore, and still do, and that are there. And it's a great place. It needs a lot of help, and obviously now we see what's going on with the current DA and the problems, and it just but there's a lot of good people that are working there that don't want that to happen and want that to change, and it's going to need some kind of shift from
Yeah.
this institutionalized corruption, I guess you would say, that we've
Yeah,
had for a long
yeah, and I
time.
mean, it seems like it's not just the DA's office. I mean, it's the mayor,
Mhm.
it's all of Hinds County, and I don't know how much you can or how much you
Well,
wanna
I can
talk
tell,
about what's
especially
going on
specifically
right
about the
now.
DA's office because I know the history of that. Ed Peters was the DA going back from the early 70s until about 2001, and then Faye Peterson became DA, who's a wonderful person and a great circuit judge. Out of from Ed to now, Faye's the only one I know that's kinda walked the straight and narrow. Now
And she
or
was the judge on the polo trial,
She was,
right?
that's right,
Okay.
she's a judge, yeah, and, but I mean, Ed Peters, you wanna talk about rumors of corruption and things, and of course, eventually what happened to him during the whole Dickie Scruggs thing, that there's stories of that going on, during that time for like 30 years of that stuff, and then you get to Robert Smith and the things that I saw, and it just kept on going, and now we're here where I don't know, I'm not gonna presume to know what Jody Owens did or did not do, but, there was an FBI raid on that office, and, that's doesn't look good. So I
Yeah.
don't, you don't know what the next step is. So I just think that there needs to be something to change that office, the culture of what's been going on for so long.
But, I mean, obviously, like you said, there are a lot of good people in
Great
that
people.
office, a lot
Yep.
of good great people that work there that you consider almost like family because you
Oh
were
yeah.
there for so long.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure that it's hard for them to be wrapped up in so much corruption and investigations. It just it's like you said, it's not a good look.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, when you're working somewhere and you're a state employee, right? And you're trying to do your job and you work for an elected official. And I've been through this, I was even before I left Robert's office, you knew he was under some scrutiny. I mean, you knew things were going bad. I mean, he was, it was rumors everywhere that he was, taking money or doing whatever. Of course, I never saw that. I'm just saying this is what everybody kept telling me at the time. So you're under that cloud and you're just trying to do your job. That's not easy, like when you're just working, you need a job. That's what you do. And I think, we talk about Rankin County with the sheriff's department there, like those deputies are good deputies and they get under a cloud because of what happened. And
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to hard thing to deal with. And now the assistant DAs in Hinds County are under a cloud because of FBI raids your office. I mean, what do you do? Let's be as honest we can. That's not a good look. I mean, it's not a good look
Yeah.
when that happens. So,
So what was Robert Smith's reaction when you told him you were leaving?
he was very angry. You have to go back to that, huh? I'll tell you that story. Okay. Yeah, he called me for like every other night for like a year and leave these like voicemails on my phone, like he was like a long lost lover. I used to tell my buddies, I was like, were we dating or something? Because he would just leave these sometime he like sang to me or something. It was really strange. And I just figured it was, the drug use and all that kind of stuff that was because, and I know I'm bashing on him. When I met him, he was a wonderful human being. Like in 2007, I loved him. Like he was a great person to deal with. Really smart guy, just,
Well,
had a
you
self-interest.
campaigned for him, and
Oh,
then you
yeah, we
campaigned
were
for him to
good
be
friends.
reelected.
Yeah, we were good friends. He just that office can change you. That power office can really change you, and it changed him for the worse, and it was a really sad thing to see. Because I was hoping when he got elected, I was like, "Man, Robert, you can run for Congress next." I always thought he'd run for Benny's seat, and, he had a really bright future, but it just, turned a dark path pretty quickly.
So what if you had to look back and think what's the craziest thing that you saw happen during your time there?
I mean, there's so
Put
many.
you on the spot
I
here.
don't know, I don't know if you can rank them by crazy. One of my by funny, I like doing that. One of my favorite stories is one of the investigators had during the prosecutors conference had rented the penthouse at the IP and brought in prostitutes, and he was wearing a fur coat and a jacuzzi. And I thought, like, we're at the prosecutors conference and one of our investigators got a fur coat on and there's prostitutes and there's a jacuzzi. This doesn't seem like, what's supposed to go on at the prosecutors conference. And, so I mean, there's
Yeah,
like
that's
little anecdotal funny stories like that would happen there. Um, and that, so it's hard to pinpoint one specifically. I know one, we were after the James Craig Anderson trial, we were riding around with Robert. Well, I wasn't, some other prosecutors were, and the CNN reporter asked him, like, "Hey, is there a lot of these civil rights murders around here?" And he turned to him, he said, "Yes, there's bodies everywhere." I'm like, well, no, there's not. I mean, that's not actually true, but it's just what he said. So it's, there's so many things from there that I think in a normal working environment, people probably wouldn't believe. So it's almost hard to articulate exactly what happened. One girl, sued him who had got fired for writing on DA letterhead to a storage unit she had rented, that she was going to prosecute him if they didn't let her stuff out because she didn't pay him. I mean, it's one thing after another like that went on there. But and that's the
lots
low
of
level. So that's just kind of funny stuff. It wasn't like the real serious stuff is the corruption that occurred and stuff like that, with especially on drug cases.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like there was a lot of that. It seems like there still is
Yeah.
maybe some of that going on. I'm not
Yeah, I
sure
don't
about the
know, but
drug
yeah.
cases, but it almost seems like you can get away with crime in Jackson, and I guess that's why we see people fleeing to Jackson,
Mhm.
to commit crime, and that's where we see a lot of carjackings, obviously, and murders, and Jackson, I believe, has become one of the most dangerous places to live, or murder capitals of the world, or of the country per capita.
Right. Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, I will say this. So Jody Owen's office is doing a good job of trying to prosecute stuff. Now I know he's got whatever potential issues are facing him shortly. But other than that, he's a marked improvement from Robert Smith. Robert was Robert didn't even show up to the office. Like there was not, it was no direction with our office. Unfortunately, and we had such good people working there, but it wasn't any direction. Now I see Jody's actually, by all accounts, what I saw, other than the Anthony Fox thing, which I didn't agree with, has done a
Yeah.
pretty good job markedly from him, and it's that's why when I heard about all this, I was really sad because I thought they were moving forward pretty well over there, and so it's sad to
Yeah,
see
they
that
made a lot of people angry with the Anthony Fox
they did.
conviction. I mean,
Mhm.
I just don't think there's any way you can chalk that up to anything other than it was just completely wrong what they did to
Absolutely,
Anthony
yeah.
Fox.
Yeah, he was definitely not guilty of that crime, should never have been indicted. I feel like to this day, that's a mayor of Jackson thing, who pushed that
Well,
more than
yeah, and
anybody.
that's what I always wonder is what was the deal there, or what went on behind the scenes that made them so gung ho
Well, I could
on
tell
wanting to prosecute Anthony Fox?
I could tell you a lot about mayors and DAs relationships. And a lot of times when you're a new DA and the mayor is, I guess at the time you would maybe consider Chokwe popular. I don't think that he is anymore. But I think at the time you could have considered that. They sometimes get influenced by that because you got one popular political figure in your community and then you want to side with them, right? And so I always felt the Anthony Fox thing may have been a product of that because I'd witnessed that personally with Robert. So you've heard of Frank Melton before, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of infamous around here, the things that he did and whatnot. Well, he really wanted to go after a guy named Sherrod Moore. Sherrod Moore was allegedly involved in the murder of an officer named R.J. Washington in 1995. This is another infamous murder around here. Now, no one ever caught R.J. Washington's murderer, but it was always assumed that Sherrod may have been involved. No evidence to that effect, really, or whatever, but it's always was out there in the community. So when we took office in 2008, which is 13 years after the murder of R.J. Washington, Frank Melton went to Robert and said, you're going to indict Sherrod Moore. Well, the rest of us kind of knew the story, and we're like, no, we don't need to indict Sherrod Moore. But Robert was just like, well, Frank says I should do it. I'm going to do it. And we're like, that's not a good idea. Well, he went and did it anyway, and he even have a file. Like he didn't have any evidence. He just went to the grand jury and indicted him. I don't, I still don't know how that happened. And then he got it.
Because explain to us that process,
Yeah,
because for the normal people like me who
right,
really don't understand. So when you get a case, when someone's arrested, you have to, in order to prosecute, in order for a county to prosecute, they have to be indicted by the grand jury.
correct. Yeah.
So what is presented to the grand jury? Just the facts or the evidence that that the DA's office has
Yeah,
at
what
that
generally
point?
happens is, if let's say JPD arrests somebody and their investigators work the case, they'll bring the file over to the DA's office. An assistant DA will review it and recommend it for one of two things. It's either a true bill, which means indict it, or a no bill, which means basically dismiss it. And that's what'll happen. But they'll be presented. So then the detective or an investigator, will present all these cases, usually like in a stack of them, and to the grand jury. Go in the grand jury, and a prosecutor will ask them like, hey, what are the facts of State versus Willie Smith or whatever, and they'll say it. And they'll go, this is what the evidence we've got, blah blah blah. Now there's nobody on the defense there during that time. There's nobody like, cross-examine anybody. It's just the prosecutor and the witness, which is usually an officer, testifying to what their evidence is. And then, you tell the grand jury, hey, we want this indicted, and they'll usually do it. Basically there's a saying, grand juries don't indict a ham sandwich. Well, you better believe it, because they will. There's occasionally a rogue grand jury here and there. Well, they'll like you could tell them don't indict this case, and they will. I've had that happen to me before. But 95% of the time, they're going to do what the prosecutors want them to do. So I could see it was easy to Robert to walk in there and say, "Hey, yeah, we heard that Sherrod Moore. I wasn't in there, but Sherrod Moore killed R.J. Washington. Okay, well, you need to indict him for it." And they were like, "Okay," like, and that's what happened,
They just
even
kinda
though there was
go
no
on.
file. Like how insane is that? But that's the dangers of our system too. Things like that can happen easily.
And I can't even see that far, but do you have it up on your screen? If I don't know if there's people asking questions, but
What?
I guess feel free to drop, any questions in the
Can't see.
comments if you have questions for Shaun and about the DA's office and his time as an assistant district attorney with Hinds County. Was there, I know you've told me at least about one case that you really didn't wanna prosecute, but it was your job, so you had to do so. But were there more cases like that that you kinda didn't feel should be prosecuted, but you had to?
I think there's a lot of cases like that when you're prosecuting people where like I say this, I didn't say this when I was a prosecutor because I kind of couldn't, but I'm against the war on drugs, right? And I think that it's been an absolute failure. It's been created just a war on our own people. And what we've, our since the early 70s, we've just incarcerated people for an addiction problem essentially. And it's not worked. It's not even a war anymore. We lost. It's over
Yeah,
with, so I always had a problem with dope crimes. I really did. Those are issues I really had. Now I understand the argument. Yeah, the dealers should go to jail. Yes and no. I believe in that. I don't know. I'd have to really think about that. But we're not attacking this correctly. We're not. We've got so many people now dying of fentanyl. We had so many people dying of meth abuse, all these kinds of things, and we don't. We focus on incarceration more than we do
rehabilitation.
rehabilitation or treatment, and that's a mistake. And I don't know when it's gonna take us to realize that. We've had over 50 years now that this war on drugs has gone on. So that was a problem for me. The other time I think I told you, I was telling in that last podcast about that case I had where a guy was 17 and his mother was beat, near to death, and his stepfather did it. And the stepfather leaves. The kid was not there during the beating. And the stepfather leaves, and the kid sees his mom, comes home, sees his mom all bloodied up, and finds the stepfather and shoots and kills him. So it wasn't like a self-defense, it was a retaliatory thing. And of course, the whole time I was thinking, it's like, well, if someone did that to my mother, I'd kill him too. But it was
Yeah,
my job to prosecute, so I had no choice. But luckily, that case ended in a mistrial, so he didn't go to jail. I was actually happy
but
about that. So
yeah, I'm sure, 'cause
yeah,
as a son yourself, like, you
right,
think about coming home and finding your mom beat to a pulp, you're gonna want to retaliate against the person who did it,
yeah,
and so I guess it's tough when you have to, especially a young guy like that guy was,
right.
and then attempt to prosecute that person, and, we had this conversation the other night about the war on drugs, and, I kind of I'm torn because I don't believe that drugs should just be readily available, but, I understand what you're saying, as we haven't done something right, or we wouldn't continue to have drug crime after drug crime after drug crime.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what the answer is there. I can't fathom just legalizing all drugs. I can't see that that would be productive, but I know that we're doing something wrong when it comes to the incarceration and like you said, not getting them the rehabilitation.
Yeah, I mean, we're not focusing on treatment enough. I mean, this is gonna there's look, it's hard to prosecute things that people want. You're never gonna stop them. Alcohol, prostitution, and drugs. We had during Prohibition in the 1920s, we had an increase in crime by when we banned alcohol. And we had more bootlegging of it, obviously. We had to do that. The rise of the mafia occurred during the 1920s when we outlawed alcohol, primarily because of that. And this is we've created these cartels. We've created these drug syndicates with our war on drugs. Like we've done this to ourselves because we didn't attack it correctly. And it's going to keep on going on until we, take our heads out of our butts and figure out a new way to attack this. And we're still going to have, I mean, think about how many friends and family members that have died or have a drug problem. Everybody can name somebody that's close to them that has been in this situation. Well, when you got a problem that's so rampant like that, incarcerating people is not the solution to it.
Yeah, and I know we briefly touched on the prosecution of Hutto, um, which is the death sentence
Yeah,
conviction that
sure.
you got. So, but to circle back to that a little bit, and so that people understand what all goes into getting a death sentence, and and how long does that take, and is it really worth it? Is it just cost the taxpayers more money?
Mm.
Kind of explain that to us,
Well, how does it
or the
cost more
death
money?
penalty,
How does it
like
work?
going after the death sentence for someone.
Yeah, I mean, what you have to do is you have to get what's called a death qualified jury, and you have to ask them whether basically are they willing to give the death penalty. And once you've picked them, they're generally going to be sequestered, so you got to pay for that. Then the trial is going to be what's called bifurcated, and so you only have a guilt phase of the trial, then you have a death phase, and so it just takes longer and it costs a lot more money. And there's a lot more exams that the defendant has to go through, a lot more motions, a lot of things just cost a lot more money. So it's very expensive.
Yeah, I can definitely
Trying
see
to read
that.
the comments
Yeah, I
or
can't see that
I
far.
can't see that far either.
You can't see that
No,
far either.
no.
I can pull them up on my phone, I guess, and see if I can see them that way. Because if there's somebody asking questions, I wanna answer them. I don't see those comments. Daniel, can you read them?
Good.
Can you I can't see that far.
This really
There's no
nothing. Yeah,
questions?
no
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
Well, what would you say is your looking back, what's the most memorable moment from the DA's office?
The most
The
memorable
most
moment.
memorable.
The most memorable. I would yeah, I'm gonna say it was that death penalty case. It was a guy basically I considered to be a serial killer and working on that for 3 years and working with all the law enforcement here in Alabama
So it
and that
took 3
experience.
years to get that
Yeah.
conviction, and yet
Mhm.
he'll be on death row for how long?
He's been on there for what? It's been 11 years now. So, yeah, I mean, probably another 15, 20. Whatever happens. Yeah. At least that, I would think. So that case was because, those things we did. The most memorable thing though, really is the people that I work with, the friends that I made. It's like, you go through these phases in your life where you're in high school, college, you make like these best friends. And then you go through your working life and it's hard to do that because you're an adult. Everybody's got adult lives. But I think when you work at the DA's office, it's like you're at war. Like you're in like a foxhole with somebody. And so you forge these really close relationships with people. And so that's kind of the best memorable thing I think from that experience. Of course, now I got a lot of funny stories and that I mean, we haven't named all here. There's hundreds of them that are crazy. And I've told the story about the twin driving the patrol car a million times and things that people would never expect that goes on. And
Did they ever get caught doing that?
no, I don't think so.
That's
It's
so
just,
insane.
but that investigator did eventually get busted for shaking down dope dealers. So I think he did go to jail. Yeah, but well, he was
Wow.
during the New Orleans Saints season, when they went to the Super Bowl, he would
Mhm.
like show up to the office in like Gucci shoes and he had Saints season tickets and he went to the Super Bowl. And we're all sitting there like, how's he going to the Super Bowl on an investigator salary? We make more than him and I can't afford that. Well, now we know like how that happened, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense now.
right.
But I'm sure your time there and, at the Attorney General's office and yet in Yazoo
Mm.
has really kind of prepared you as a defense attorney because you know what the other side, the prosecution is thinking. You know how to think that way. So you're better prepared to defend.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if necessarily how they're thinking. It's like I know what they have to do. Like, and I had this come up recently. Like when you're a prosecutor, you got to consult with the victims if it's a violent crime. You got to. And it's sometimes you got some really shitty victims, right? That like some people that didn't, I mean, I'm not saying all victims are shitty, but like a victim, like, of a crime who never had anything to do with their kid, and now they all of a sudden show up. And then now they're raising hell, but they haven't seen the kid in 20 years because they were like a deadbeat dad.
Mhm.
And, so but your prosecutor gotta deal with that person still, and you gotta, like, try to get that negotiated. So, I've got that perspective and how that works, and how I know that, it's not their fault when they can't give me the deal that I want. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And, I mean, speaking of, defense work, you now have the Yurtkuran law firm.
Yep, I
Do you
did.
wanna tell everybody about that?
Yeah, I run the Yurtkuran law firm over in Fondren. I do, federal and state criminal defense. I do, I'll do civil litigation like car wrecks, that's about it. I don't do any divorces, and, will never do that because I always say that family law like, what happens in chancery court is far worse than what happens in circuit court because people are way more mad, when it comes to their kids and their divorces. So, I don't deal with that. But if you get arrested with a DUI or you kill someone, that I know, that I can help you with. So, just call me anytime, 601-906-9094.
OneTextLaw.com, and
OneTextLaw.com.
you
Yeah.
have
Or
a Facebook page for your law
yeah, everybody
firm.
inbox me on Facebook. I'm real cool with that. Just let me know you got any kind of, misdemeanor problem, simple assault, domestic violence. I deal with all of that. I know how all that works. I can, be glad to give you a free consultation, talk to you about it.
Well, great. Well, I know everyone is loving to hear all the ins and outs and the things that go on behind the scenes. Any other funny stories you wanna tell us?
I don't know. I like now you're putting me on the spot. There's so many of them that I could generally think of. We had one investigator that used to drive us around to find witnesses, and he he used to drive with his eyes closed, and he'd say, "Well, I get my power nap while I'm driving," and we're all like, "Huh? What? Like, how do you do that?" And stuff like crazy stuff like that.
I think especially maybe it's women, but I think that there's just this big appeal with true crime.
Yeah, they love it, right? Yeah,
We
yeah,
well, I just wanna understand why somebody does something, and I know I guess you can never understand certain people when they have these tendencies just to go murder someone,
right.
but, yeah, my mind can never truly comprehend that, but I think it's wanting to you get to the bottom of it, and I know Therese April was in here before us and
Mhm.
did a podcast on Luke Woodham and that school shooting, and I've never understood how someone could walk into a school and shoot up a school,
Right.
and so just, like, the behind the scenes, just like with the Carly Gregg case,
Mm,
everyone's enthralled with that because we wanna understand why she did that or what made her do that, and so I think people are really and that's why the Hulu documentary has been
yeah.
so impactful, going back to look at different cases where, people in college, death in the dorms have been murdered because it's so horrific, but we wanna understand it,
Maybe
and
we're
so
just murder addicts. I don't know. Sometimes I think that, like people just love this, kind of stuff. Obviously I've seen so much of it that like I don't really ever find interest in it much, anymore. Because again, I've seen too much of it. Except for that Menendez brothers things. I found that pretty interesting.
yeah.
What happened with them. Yeah, they do. What I found about most murders though, kind of saying touched on this earlier. There's not like usually some real interesting reason behind it, It's usually like somebody got pissed at their girlfriend and killed her, like that's one that happens all the time. Somebody stole somebody's drugs,
Let's hope that never happens here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean that's what happens. It's like
Yeah.
they get pissed at their girlfriend and they kill them, or they get jealous, they kill them. I had a case like that too, where a guy killed his side piece's boyfriend. Like he was married and she was a side piece. And then he killed her boyfriend. I'm like, wait, dude, you're married. Like, I mean, and we got him on the cell phone tracking. Like we tracked him right to where he was standing when this guy was murdered. Like, like you're so mad that your side piece has a boyfriend, but you have a wife. Like
Well, I
it's
mean,
just
we saw
ridiculous
that in
stuff.
Rankin County with the sheriff who was, tracking people's cell phones and,
Oh, with Fred Shanks and stuff. Yes.
yeah,
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
just insane.
Yeah, yeah, people I mean, it's these domestic relationships that really I feel like that's the number one cause of murders is domestic relationships. Chokeway's not wrong. The only one thing he ever said right was that, it's interpersonal relationships, which is kinda true, when you think about it. And then, like I said, it's money and drugs, like, that's the other thing, but it's not usually like this it's not Ted Bundy walking around all the time, you don't have that, guys. Nobody's, like, cutting off someone's head and wearing it as a hat. Like, that's not, like, a normal thing. That's, like, some real psychopath, you don't see a whole lot of that. No, I saw that with James Hutto. That was the only time I've ever seen that.
Did you see a
Mm,
lot of gang violence? A lot of gang crime?
I mean, there's gang crime in Jackson, but it's not as, at least what I saw wasn't like it was more like they were kind of low rent gangs. Is the way we looked at it. It wasn't. I mean, but Therese actually's got a lot of good interesting information about that it's a little bit more high level. But what I saw was not tons of that. Now there was a lot of that in the 1990s. I know that a lot more that what during my time that I saw. It was just a bunch of street idiots that kill each other over the three things I just named. And that's what you got going on in Jackson right now. I mean, and now the worst part about it though, so in my time, it was maybe they were a little bit older. Like they were like 18, 19, 20. Now you're seeing 14, 15-year-olds involved in this thing. And that's
It's
the
so
really
sad.
dangerous part about it. Yeah. And they're just, and
That's when
because,
you get into the culture, like the
mhm,
culture of Jackson today.
yeah, it's dangerous. And yeah, they have not, I mean, parenting, all those things are not happening there in Jackson has caused this and when you're a 14-year-old kid, I mean, let's just say you're stupid, right? You're dumb. You're
Yeah.
going to make a mistake. Like, so an armed robbery I'll call it normal armed robbery, turns into a murder because the 14-year-old gets nervous and kills the
Mhm.
person. And that's the danger. And you're seeing that a lot in Jackson going on. And it's just kind of run rampant. And and I don't know how you get under control. That's the really, it's going to take a significant investment from the state into Jackson in terms of the justice system because we got 4 circuit judges. Well, there's no way to process that kind of crime with 4 circuit judges. You just can't do it. You don't have
It's too
enough
much of
assistant
it.
DAs. Yeah, I mean, I went out to the DA's office in Phoenix years ago, and they had like 150 assistant DAs or something crazy like that. Now, I understand that's a much bigger city, but when you took the relation to our crime here is far worse. We have to expand the DA's office, expand the PD's office, add circuit judges. Otherwise, this is just going to get backed up. You know.
We kinda have a running joke when we watch the news because Chief Wade, who's the chief of police in Jackson,
Mhm.
I always say to you, like, "I don't know how he gets any work done,"
Yeah, he's
because
always doing a press
he's
conference.
always giving a press conference.
There's always a balloon release because
Yeah.
somebody's dying. Like, oh, we sorry about this person dying. Like, what are we gonna do?
Like, when does
Okay.
he actually get to
He
work?
needs to hire like a press secretary, like the president does.
I mean,
And
it's
come
that
up.
bad. It's that bad,
Keon
and
John Pierre be out of job shortly. Like, give it,
there
bring
well,
her in there,
we don't need her here. No
bring
no
her
more
here.
DEI hires.
You know,
We
well,
don't need that.
yeah. I mean, something because I mean, it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be this violent, but I mean, but it is, and that's I don't know what the solution is, but I know that while it's going on, we have to have a robust justice system that processes it quickly, and we just don't have
Well, I
that.
mean, and I've told you all about my sister, and so, my sister was brutally, brutally murdered.
Yeah,
I'm my only sibling in South Jackson, and, no one did anything about it.
right.
I don't know if it was just drug related, gang related, and they just didn't wanna touch it with a 10-foot pole, but it
Yeah,
just got swept under the rug, and, that was back in 2009, and to this day, no one has done anything to attempt and find the person who I mean, when I say brutally murdered, it was
yeah,
bad.
right.
It was really bad, and so you would think that that's the crime they would wanna get under control, yet I know that she couldn't be the only one that they didn't do anything about. There's gotta be a lot of crimes like that are not being, investigated like they should be, and like you said, they don't have the staff
They don't. I
to
mean,
deal with it.
South Jackson, for anybody who doesn't know that, is run by the gangs right now.
Mhm.
And Chief Wade said that. It's not something I'm just saying. I
Yeah.
mean, it's run by the gangs, and it's kinda like the Detroit and RoboCop, if you've ever seen RoboCop. You probably haven't, but the guys out there seen RoboCop. It's like that. And then you got a city that the gangs are running a portion of it. It's like some post-apocalyptic nightmare, and nothing's been done,
Yeah.
nothing, and, I mean, it's something like, we get the water crisis makes national news, which it should. I mean, it's a horrible thing,
Mhm.
but, like, that is something that needs to make national news when street gangs have taken over a portion of a city.
Yeah.
And it's not being attacked, and I'm not blaming Chief Wade because he doesn't have the resources to do it. This
Right.
is solely on the fault of the mayor of Jackson, who's not done anything and has allowed this to happen. And,
Almost makes you wanna build a wall, doesn't
yeah, I mean, you
it?
kinda have to at this point. You kinda have to do that, because, it's the problem is just going to escalate. Like, right now, I was talking to Clay, on the radio show about this.
Mhm.
I said, "We were teenagers in the 1990s, and Jackson was just starting to fall then." We're talking me and
Yeah.
Clay were. Well, that was 20 or 30 years ago now, right? Well, what's this place gonna look like in 30 years? Like, look
That's
at
scary.
that's a scary thought. I mean, it's gonna look like Mad Max. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I mean, it's if this kind of decay has happened in the last 30 years, I mean, it's gonna be like a wasteland, and,
But to give
that's
credit
dangerous.
where credit is due, to I mean, like you said, Chief Wade, he's doing all he can. I believe that. Bo Lucky and Capitol Police, I expanding the CCID was one of the best things that could have happened. I know you feel safer where
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
live, and those guys are doing a great job, so it's not all bad.
No, it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not all bad, and it's and the city complains constantly that the state of Mississippi doesn't do anything. There would be no city if there wasn't for the state of Mississippi.
That's
The state of
right,
Mississippi
that's
has
right.
done everything, to save the city of Jackson that you can do, and save it from itself,
Yeah,
really. And there would be no Bellhaven right now if there was not Capitol Police. There would
yeah,
not be. 3 years ago when they were terrorizing the neighborhood, people were already saying, "We gotta go," setting up night watches, basically machine gun nests in their front yard. Not really, but that was the next step. If they had not done that, that neighborhood would be vacant 3 years later.
so they were
And
like, how many carjackings
there was
were
2 in front of my house in one night in 2021. 2. I mean, and I live in where I live. I live in a
yeah,
good neighborhood there. It's a it just but Chokwe Lumumba has allowed this lax law enforcement before Wade got there, obviously, and and that allowed that culture to happen. And it's a dangerous place that we're going. If the state had not stepped in, we wouldn't have those portions of the city. We wouldn't have a city anymore. And
yeah.
that's a scary thought, but I mean that's where we were heading had the state not stepped in.
Well, we had Fred Shanks here last week, and he talked about kind of what he's dubbed the Save Jackson Committee, and so
Right,
they are working. I know that our legislators are working at the Capitol in an attempt to get things under control, and I don't know if it's gonna take just a total takeover
right.
or not, but, have have hope. I'm hanging on to some hope that we can get our capital back in good shape because it does represent all of Mississippi. Obviously the people that live there and work there are probably more concerned than anyone, but I think all Mississippians should be concerned when that should be our pride and joy of the state is what our capital city looks like and how the things that are taking place there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody, well, Robust Jackson, we have a brain drain problem. I think you had Shad on. You guys talked about that a little bit.
Yeah,
And one of the reasons we do is because we don't have a urban city that's safe for young people to live in. We don't have that.
yeah,
So we don't have like all these great concert venues in Jackson. We don't have, all these cool places to go. We have a wasteland of crime and
yeah,
infrastructure problems that if so we're never people are, well, I mean, if you're 23 years old and you've got an engineering degree, yeah, you're gonna go move to Nashville. Yeah, you're gonna move to Atlanta. You're gonna move to Dallas,
mhm,
because there's stuff to do. You
yeah,
can't, I mean, because young people don't want to live in the suburbs. They just don't. They don't. They want to live in the
yeah,
city.
yeah.
And Jackson, Mississippi doesn't offer them those kinds of things here. So we're gonna keep losing the best and the brightest if we don't attack this problem. I mean, it's gonna get worse. So it's
Yeah.
something that is affect and that does affect the entire state.
Right, and I completely agree. Well, Sean, thank you so much. I know you're gonna come back more, and
Yep.
we'll get into some political stuff. I know people don't know how we can actually tolerate each other when we are
Right. Yep.
polar opposite ends of the political spectrum, but we are able to make it work, so I think people are interested to hear a little bit of that from us, and so we're gonna do some more of this, and thank you for being here this Friday afternoon, and we will see all of you next week.